AITA for sending evidence of my wife's close relationship with a colleague to her boss after she lied to me? My wife and I recently attended the wedding of a college friend. We brought our son, who is 8 years old. The ceremony was outdoors, and the reception was in a large barn on the property. Everything seemed fine. Our son was excited about the whole affair. He loved seeing everyone dressed up. The wedding itself went smoothly. Our son was well behaved during the vows. He even managed to stay relatively clean during the cocktail hour. I made sure he ate something substantial before the reception started. I did not want him running around on an empty stomach with all that sugar around. He made friends with some of the other children there. This made my wife and I feel relieved. Keeping him entertained at these kinds of events can be difficult. We were actually able to relax and enjoy ourselves for a little while. I checked on him periodically as the evening progressed. He seemed to be having a good time playing with his new friends. They were running around, laughing, and generally being kids. The parents of the other children were nearby. I felt comfortable letting him play unsupervised for short periods. I trusted that the adults would intervene if anything serious happened. My wife and I both appreciated the opportunity to catch up with friends. It is hard to find time for socializing these days. During the reception, our son became fascinated with a small group of older kids who were playing a game near the edge of the field. I let him go join them, figuring he would be fine for a little while. My wife and I mingled, chatted with other guests, and enjoyed the music. About an hour later, I went to check on our son. He was still playing with the other kids and seemed perfectly happy. I waved at him, and he waved back, so I returned to my wife. That is when I noticed her talking to a man I did not recognize. I assumed he was another guest, perhaps a friend of the bride or groom that I hadn't met. I watched them for a few more moments from a short distance. My wife put her hand on his arm while she was talking. I felt a surge of anger, but I tried to dismiss it. I reminded myself that I tend to be an overthinker and that I should not jump to conclusions. Maybe he was just a very friendly guy, and she was just being polite. I took a deep breath and told myself to relax. I needed to give her the benefit of the doubt before I made any accusations or caused a scene at the wedding. However, I could not shake the feeling that something was not right. I kept replaying the scene in my head, analyzing their body language and the tone of their voices. It bothered me that she did not introduce us if they had just met. It felt like she was intentionally keeping me away. I decided I needed to find out who this man was and what he wanted with my wife. I started walking toward them, ready to join the conversation and hopefully clear up my suspicions. I walked over, intending to introduce myself, but as I got closer, I realized something was off. My wife was standing very close to the man, and they were both laughing. It seemed a little too jovial, a little too intimate for a casual conversation between strangers. It wasn't that they touched, it was that they leaned close together, and she gave him a look I had only seen her give me. I cleared my throat and said hello. My wife jumped slightly, as if she had been startled. She introduced me to the man, who she identified as David. She said he worked with her at the law firm. I work in finance, so I had never had reason to meet her colleagues. I shook David's hand. His grip was firm. I noticed he held on a fraction longer than necessary. My wife did not seem to notice anything unusual. She asked if I wanted a drink. I requested a beer. She got one for me from the refrigerator. I took a sip and joined them on the couch. They had been discussing a recent case. I listened for a while as they talked about legal jargon I did not understand. I felt like an outsider. My wife seemed animated and happy. I had not seen her like this in a while. I wondered if it was because David was there. I tried to dismiss the thought. David was polite enough, but there was something smug about his demeanor. He made a comment about how my wife was a brilliant lawyer and a real asset to the firm. I thanked him, but I felt a strange sense of unease. The way he looked at her was like he owned her. The rest of the evening passed without incident. We danced, ate, and eventually left with our tired son. However, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I kept replaying the scene in my head. My wife's surprised reaction when I approached. The way she and David stood close. The smug look on his face. I managed to push it to the back of my mind until we got home. I helped our son get ready for bed. I read him a story and tucked him in. Then I went downstairs, and my wife was already on the couch. I sat down next to her. I knew I needed to say something. I could not just let it go. The feeling in my gut was too strong. It felt like I was going crazy, but I needed to know what was going on. I started by saying that I had a great time at the wedding. I mentioned how nice it was to see family and friends. Then I steered the conversation toward David. I said he seemed like a nice guy. I asked her how long she had known him. I tried to sound casual, like I was just making conversation. I didn't want to scare her off or make her defensive before I even got to the point. I needed her to be honest. When we got home, I decided to address it directly. I asked my wife how she knew David. She said she worked with him and that they occasionally collaborated on cases. I asked her if anything else happened between them. She seemed offended by the question. She asked me if I did not trust her. I said that I did, but I found their interaction at the wedding a bit odd. She brushed it off, saying I was being paranoid. She said David was just a colleague and that I was overreacting. I wanted to believe her, but I couldn't shake my suspicions. I tried to push my feelings aside. I told myself I was being insecure and irrational. My wife is a smart, capable woman, and I should trust her. But every time David's name came up, I felt a knot in my stomach. I didn't want to be the jealous husband, but I couldn't ignore the growing unease. I decided to start paying closer attention, hoping to find some reassurance. Or, I suppose, to confirm my worst fears. It was a difficult time. I didn't sleep well. I found myself checking her phone when she was in the shower. I know that was wrong, but I felt desperate. I didn't find anything concrete, just a lot of messages from David. They seemed innocent enough, mostly about work projects and deadlines. Still, the sheer volume of communication bothered me. It felt excessive for a simple working relationship. I began to feel trapped between wanting to trust her and needing to know the truth. Over the next few weeks, I paid closer attention to my wife's behavior. She started staying late at the office more frequently. She would often receive calls or texts from David, even on weekends. When I asked about it, she said they were just discussing work-related matters. But I noticed she would often go into another room to take the calls, as if she did not want me to overhear. One evening, I decided to do some digging. I waited until my wife was asleep, and then I looked through her phone. I know this was a violation of her privacy, but I felt I had no other choice. I found a series of text messages between her and David. The messages were not explicitly romantic, but they were suggestive. They made jokes that implied shared intimacy, and there were references to meetings that seemed to go beyond professional collaboration. I scrolled back further in the message history. I wanted to see how long this had been going on. The messages stretched back several months. There were frequent exchanges, sometimes multiple times a day. I noticed a pattern. The messages became more frequent and flirtatious whenever I was out of town for work. There were also gaps in the conversation. I suspected these gaps corresponded to times when they were together in person and did not need to text. The whole thing felt like a punch to the gut. I screenshotted all the messages and sent them to my own email address as evidence. I closed her phone and put it back on the nightstand. I could not sleep. I replayed the messages in my head, trying to decipher hidden meanings and unspoken intentions. I wondered how I could have been so blind. I thought about David. He was a colleague, someone I considered a friend. We had worked together on several projects. Now, I questioned everything I thought I knew about him. I tossed and turned, anger and betrayal washing over me. Eventually, exhaustion took over, and I drifted into a restless sleep. I felt sick. I confronted my wife the next morning. I showed her the text messages and asked her to explain. She initially denied anything inappropriate, but eventually, she admitted that she and David had developed a close friendship. She claimed that it had never crossed the line into a full-blown affair, but she acknowledged that their relationship was inappropriate and that she should have been more transparent with me. I was furious and hurt. I felt betrayed. I told my wife that I needed time to process what she had told me. I spent the next few days trying to decide what to do. I considered divorce. I considered confronting David directly. I also thought about just ignoring it. I could pretend that she had never told me about the affair. We could go back to our lives as if nothing had happened. That seemed impossible, though. I knew that I could never truly trust her again if I did that. The knowledge of what she did would always be there. It would poison our relationship. I could not reconcile that with the love that I still had for her, or what I thought we had. I needed to do something that would address the issue directly and hopefully prevent it from happening again. I had to consider the long-term impact on both of us. After a lot of thought, I saw a path forward. It would not be easy, but it felt like the right thing to do. It involved a level of calculated action that did not come naturally to me. I am typically a very direct person, but I felt that being direct in this situation would make things worse. It could lead to a shouting match or a permanent split. I thought about all the angles, and then I considered all the people that would be affected by it. I made a list of pros and cons and decided on my final decision. Ultimately, I decided to take a different approach. My wife works at a prestigious law firm with a strict code of conduct. I knew that if I reported her and David's behavior to her boss, it could have serious consequences for their careers. I drafted an email to the managing partner of the firm. In the email, I detailed my observations at the wedding, the text messages I had found, and my concerns about the inappropriate nature of their relationship. I did not accuse them of anything specific, but I strongly implied that their behavior was unprofessional and violated the firm's ethical standards. I tried to make the information as neutral as possible, simply stating the facts as I knew them. I reread the email multiple times before sending it. I wanted to be sure I had not exaggerated or made any false claims. I also considered the potential consequences for my wife and me. I knew reporting this could create a hostile work environment. It could even cost my wife her job. However, I felt a responsibility to say something. I believed the situation was wrong. I hoped the managing partner would investigate and take appropriate action. I did not expect my wife to be directly involved so quickly. I also didn't think my name would come up at all. I thought the firm would handle it more discreetly. My wife told me her boss was angry. He accused her of trying to sabotage David. She explained that she had nothing to do with the email. She said she was shocked and upset by the accusations. I felt guilty that my actions had put her in this position. I knew I had to tell the truth. I decided to call the managing partner myself. I wanted to explain my reasons for sending the email. I also wanted to protect my wife from any further repercussions. I planned to take full responsibility for my actions. I sent the email and waited. A few days later, my wife received a call from her boss. She was asked to come in for a meeting. When she returned home that evening, she was distraught. She said her boss had confronted her about the email. She denied any wrongdoing, but she admitted to having a close friendship with David. Her boss told her that their behavior was unacceptable and that it could damage the firm's reputation. Both she and David were placed on administrative leave pending an internal investigation. My wife was furious at me. She accused me of trying to ruin her life. She said I was vindictive and cruel. She could not believe I would do such a thing. I told her that I was not trying to ruin her life. I was trying to protect myself and our family. I said that her actions had put our marriage at risk and that I needed to take steps to ensure that it did not happen again. I told her that I would not tolerate her having inappropriate relationships with her colleagues. She said that I should have talked to her instead of going behind her back and reporting her to her boss. I said that I tried to talk to her, but she had been dishonest and evasive. I felt that I had no other choice. Now, our marriage is in crisis. My wife is angry and resentful. She feels that I have betrayed her trust. Some of our mutual friends think I went too far by involving her employer. They say I should have handled the situation privately. However, other friends support my actions. They say my wife was in the wrong and that I had a right to protect myself. They believe I did what was necessary to send a message and hold her accountable. I felt that if I confronted David physically, I would have been in the wrong. I also felt that confronting her over and over would lead to her denying it over and over. I needed to apply a different kind of pressure, one where she would be forced to admit the truth. I am starting to question whether I made the right decision. I am worried that I have irreparably damaged our marriage. I am also concerned about the impact this will have on my wife's career. But I also feel that I was justified in my actions. I believe my wife was being dishonest and manipulative, and I needed to take decisive steps to protect myself. AITA for reporting my wife's actions to her boss. Did I overreact? Was there a better way to handle this situation? I feel like I am drowning. I wanted to teach her a lesson, but I worry it was too harsh of a lesson. I was never mad at David. I felt he was in the wrong, but my anger was directed at my wife. I thought what she did was far worse, since we were married. What he did was just trying to sleep with a woman. I still think she was wrong, but I wonder if going to her boss was just too nuclear of an option. The end does not justify the means. I understand her being angry at me, but I also feel like I was pushed to that point. If she would have just told me the truth, none of this would have ever happened. Now our lives are completely upside down and I wonder if there was anything else I could have done.